Hush not, child, and don't cry. Your folks might understand you by and by. Just move on up toward your destination. Though you may find from time to time complications.
The stone builder refused. Yes, sir. I can assure you, this is not going to be like any other type of tale you have ever heard, sir.
And take the trip.
It's all right here in this one book.
Though there may
This book is
be
called The Stone the Builder Refused. Now I'm going to let you take a look at that right now. Well, actually, you know what? I'm not going to let you take a look at that because I want to get over some other things first. Let me tell you about another book. Now I know we're all familiar with probably the most important book we call it the Holy Bible, sir. You're familiar with the Holy Bible, aren't you, sir? Mine's a little different than most people. I read it a lot. Now this here, sir, this here, as you can see, is a Holy Bible. This here is the Old Testament and the New Testament. Now, there was a character that you might know, sir, by the name of Jesus Christ. Well, Jesus Christ came into the world, and the reason he did, sir, was so that he could tear this book literally in half and take this book and just throw it out. You don't even need that book, sir. That's the Old Testament. That's just garbage. We don't need that. That's just nonsense. Because what we got here, we got the New Testament, sir. This is the word and the testimony of Jesus Christ. Now look, if you had a choice, sir, if you wanted to read one or the other, which would you rather read, sir? I mean, can you imagine? Look at that. You could read this one 5 times before you could read this one once. And furthermore, if you read this 5 times, you would get 1,000 times more than anything in this book. This book is garbage. That's all I got to say about the Old Testament. So moving right along, we're going to get into what I like to think of as the New Testament. The book of Revelations. Now the book of Revelations, I'll tell you what, the book of Revelations is something special. It was written by a guy, I mean, he's put out on an island all by himself. Can you imagine just being out on an island all by yourself? What a terrible fate. I mean, he had the time to sit around and write this book, though, I'll tell you what. And he says here at the beginning, he says, "Blessed is the one who reads the words of this prophecy, and blessed are those who hear it and take to heart what is written in it, because the time is near." Now he wrote the time is near, but this is almost 1,000 years. I don't know how long ago. It was a long time ago. But the time is near. I mean, it feels like the time is always near when the way we're living these days. The tribes of Reuben, of Gad, the tribes of Asher. I mean, who the hell were these people? God damn, I know the Cherokee, and I know the Sioux, and I know the, let's see here, the locusts. I mean, he's talking crazy here. Look at this. The locusts look like horses prepared for battle. On their locusts prepared for battle. What the hell is that? I don't know. That was as the 7 thunders spoke. Okay. He says all this. Yeah, honey. So I took the little scroll, and I ate the little scroll. But when I eat it in my stomach, it got all sour. But then I was told, you must prophesy again to many people, many nations, languages, and kings. I ate my little scroll in the story, and then I prophesied, and I made visions. Well, I'll tell you what. That little scroll that he ate was a mushroom. And that sounds a little wacky out there, starting at the end of the Bible and starting to say that this guy ate a mushroom and had visions and all that, but that's what it's all about, sir. You just take a look right there, you won't be able to deny it. He ate a little scroll. I don't know what a little scroll is. Do you know what a little scroll is? Well, you give me a better definition. You're saying to yourself, St. John was eating mushrooms, having visions. That's right. That's exactly what he was doing. He was stuck on an island with lots of mushrooms, nothing else to do except to eat them. And when he ate them, he became possessed by the Spirit of the Lord. Now, I don't want to get you spun on that idea of thinking that, these people, these pre-Christians, because they were really Jews to begin with, I want you to think that these people were really eating mushrooms. What else were they doing besides eating mushrooms? Quite possibly having orgies. Another thing these early Christians liked to do was smoke marijuana. That's right, we have evidence of that, but I'll get to that later. But one thing I want you to understand is that it wasn't just Jesus that was a mushroom, or the early God Yahweh of the Hebrew people, Because throughout cultures everywhere throughout the whole world, there have been a whole world of mushrooms. For instance, one of the oldest known tales in Western culture dates back to the Epic of Gilgamesh. The Epic of Gilgamesh details the account in the story of Gilgamesh and his friend Enkidu. Enkidu perishes, and Gilgamesh is fraught with frustration and degradation and detrepidation, so he goes to find the herb of immortality. If that weren't enough, one of the other oldest books that we talk about, the Rig Vedas, details the use of the psychedelic mushroom Amanita muscaria, also known as fly agaric. Now then, if I would be so foolish as to not forget one of the Eastern cultures and religions, Buddhism. That's right, a little Buddha sitting under a tree had himself an enlightenment. I tell you what, lots of trees. But now then, does it seem likely that just these ancient cultures would have the gift of the knowledge of prophecy and be people who be aware of such invigorating knowledge and wisdom? Well, no, I don't think so. There have been many people all times who knew this information. One such person a few hundred years ago, we like to call him, we think of him as William Blake. That's right there. William Blake, I tell you what, William Blake was something else. He wrote about the mushrooms. But you know, the granddaddy of them all, somebody in our culture who may have inspired perhaps the entire world at this point due to the fact that we have such Yes, I could say a few things about the identity of Jesus, though I'm not quite sure where to start on that question. It's very rather perplexing. I guess at the outset, if we were to look back at this concept of Jesus, we'd think of him as really rather like an ancient Superman, wouldn't we? A lot like Clark Kent, walking around the ordinary people, but possessing rather extraordinary powers. I realize that a lot of the ideas in the Bible sound rather impossible, but you see, of course, with God, all things are possible. Now, one of the most extraordinary ideas was put forth by a man named Allegro. I believe his name is John Allegro. I do believe I have his book. It came out in the late 60s or 1970s. I guess a rather strange ideas permeated in the late 60s, as we know. See, here is the title. And this here, of course, very interesting ideas is that Mr. Allegro put forth the idea that Jesus was a mushroom. Yes, of course, he said his name was a code word for mushroom, and Mr. Allegro was somebody who was a linguist trained at Oxford. He spoke Sumerian. I guess he didn't speak Sumerian. He was familiar with how to read ancient Sumerian, Greek, as well as Hebrew. Now, he was hired to help translate the Dead Sea Scrolls when they were first found, and he found this rather odd idea that these words in Hebrew translated into Sumerian spelt the names of mushrooms. Found it rather strange, and when he suggested this idea to his colleagues, of course, he was fired. There has been some new evidence come light. In fact, one of my colleagues recently back from a dig in Old Jerusalem, he came with an ancient artifact he brought. Now then, if you take a look at this is the artifact that my colleague brought back. Rather interesting object, isn't it? Now then, at first, these people didn't know what they had. You know, at first they thought they found some type of musical instrument. It seemed to have played music. Made a rather nice bubbling sound. Well then, you know, one of my other colleagues was looking at it, and he noticed that inside here there was some black charcoal stuff. So he took it down to the lab and he analyzed it, and he found it was cannabis sativa. So then, what it turned out to be was actually a water pipe. And it turned out that the ancient Israelis were actually smoking marijuana. Now, let me demonstrate how this works.
It turns out that the ancient Israelis were actually stoners. What they were doing, they were actually smoking marijuana in their church. Now, it was actually what their church revolved around, at least at one point we know, because we found this evidence, which suggests, of course, that, in fact, the ancient Jews were not even a race of people, but rather groups of people who chose to get high and smoke marijuana, and perhaps, as Mr. Allegro suggested, use mushrooms. And they were persecuting the Jews, not because they were Jews, but because they wanted to get high. Therefore, they had to take their practices underground. And this, of course, starts perhaps the first early underground idea of drug trade.
Plato's Socrates, Hermes, also called Mercury, the Egyptian Ankh, Pandora's box, the Buddha, the Phoenix, the tree of knowledge of good and evil, the burning bush, Jesus on the cross, the alchemist's philosopher's stone, Shiva, the Smurfs, and even Mario Brothers. These images are all symbolic representations of the psychedelic mushroom. These mushrooms are the central point on the matrix of reality. They are the spring of human consciousness, and by better understanding the role the mushrooms played within these mythologies, we may better understand the human psyche and how these images have been interpreted to manipulate human consciousness. Psychedelic mushrooms, also called magic mushrooms, contain psychotropic alkaloids, which are chemicals which are molecularly much like our brain's own chemistry, and they have the ability to drastically change our perceptions.